That was my foray into entrepreneurship. It didn't work out very well. Ended up in a lot of tears and Nigel going bankrupt and losing his house. And I lost the battle. We're not going to sell any of your stuff. We just won't because we're Jedi. But what would you say to us buying your company? And Chris and I were sitting there starting and said, yeah, let's talk. And that's when it started. We've built a large online shopping website for one of my friends whose fairly unknown e-commerce site sent him a suggestion that they should merge. That was the biggest regret in his life because that unknown guy was Sam Morgan and the company was TradeMe. The way I describe my journey as an entrepreneur, my first exit gave me a deposit for a house. My second exit paid off the mortgage. And since then, I've divorced and I now have a new mortgage. So that's why I'm back.
Hi and welcome to Two Commas. Today we've got Igor Portugal on the show. Igor's a bit of a legend around the tech scene in New Zealand, being the innovator in the Linux space back in the late 90s. He's taken multiple companies from founding to exit, and then he pivoted into being an author, not just any author. He's now a best-selling author. He's also on a mission to help raise the profile of technology in New Zealand and doing it through individual conversations and coffees with people that you may have heard of or may not have heard of. He's got a prolific LinkedIn following. He's a bit of a raconteur and an all-round good guy. I reckon you'll really enjoy this episode with Igor. I certainly enjoyed the filming of it. Igor, you built and sold two companies successfully, and then you took a job. Why?
Well, that's a great question. It wasn't something that came to mind first to me after I sold the second company. In fact, I tried to build another business, but at the time, my marriage was sort of hitting the rocks, and my wife at the time made it very clear that there's no way we're investing in another business. So, and please go and earn some money somehow. And so that was a direct message. So I've ended up being forced to go and take a job.
Okay. Did the marriage succeed?
It needless to say, it did not.
It did not. Okay.
But it wasn't. It was reasonably amicable. We still remain on good talking terms and are good, I would think, parents to two lovely children and
wonderful
who we're co-parenting.
Yes.
But that was sort of the first tell signs that we're not likely to last.
Okay, got it. And I probably understand that the notion behind the scenes there is that starting a business, especially a startup, building something that hasn't been done before and there's no proven need for that thing, is a brutal journey. And so if you've got some challenges at home, a job presents probably a bit of a safe harbour, and so it can give you some ability to have a bit of certainty, less financial risk, those sorts of things, I'd imagine. Was that part of the...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But the challenge is, once you've been your own boss and once you've been running a business, convincing employers that you're employable is a very, very tough road. And I've shared this conversation with a number of other former entrepreneurs, is that you start looking for a job and the first question people ask you, well, can you ever work for anybody? Would you follow the line?
How do you answer that?
And my answer is, for me, is yes, I would. So in my first business, it was just the two partners, Chris and I. And when we started it, I had no idea about business governance or running a business or anything. And we sold it to Jedi, and Jedi installed a board of directors. And so suddenly I've ended up being as part of a formal board of directors. And I actually saw the real benefit of having discipline and governance around the business. So when I started Vodacom, I've got some investors on board, and I've started with a good governance day one. So all the way through for 12 years, I was reporting to a board of directors. So in fact, I always had a boss. My boss was my board, and my board was sometimes very, very tough on me. So working for someone was never really an issue for me. As long as I do what I love, I don't mind whether I work for someone or whether I work for myself.
Yeah. Let's pick up on the asterisk bit, as when you and I first encountered each other was in the late 90s in New Zealand.
Yep.
And you were the Linux pioneer in New Zealand, and Asterisk was a Linux consultancy.
That's right.
So talk us through the early days of founding that company based upon a kernel developed by Linus Torvalds, if I believe correctly, competing with IBM in a world of, big boxes, big technology, and the internet was kind of exploding. So talk us through the early days of building a Linux consultancy in a world that didn't know what the hell Linux was, nor why they should pay for something that was ostensibly free. Talk us through that journey.
Absolutely. So I was trained as a software developer. And in the 90s, I was working as a contractor, developing database systems and mobile technology for other people. And one of the things I sort of got earlier on is that bug that I got to be an entrepreneur because everyone overseas becoming overnight millionaires, and it's a .com era, and I'm sitting here working for somebody else and I'm missing out.
This is a fool's game. Yep, I got it. Mm-hmm.
So one day I walked into a computer store and met a British guy called Nigel, and we started talking, and turns out he was the owner of that store, and I've asked him, do you guys have any companies that buy computers from you? And he said, yeah, of course. And I said, do you provide any support to them? He said, well, not really. And I said, well, why don't we set up a joint venture and I'll come and I'll be your support guy? And he said, that's a great idea. So that was my foray into entrepreneurship. It didn't work out very well, ended up in a lot of tears, and Nigel going bankrupt and losing his house. So was and I lost about $20,000 in that whole thing. And I always tell everyone and myself that it's probably the cheapest MBA I could have ever gotten for $20,000 to see a company collapse and from inside and see what happens when it does.
Can I double click on that? What were the things that you now look back upon as a successful founder that you did not do in that first company?
Well, fortunately, I didn't do anything to contribute to the company collapse. Okay. So what collapsed was not our JV. What collapsed was the original computer shop.
Got it.
And the main reason it collapsed was, funny enough, the GST, because GST at the time was 12.5%, and Nigel decided that the strategy that he would take was to do a 10% margin and be the cheapest on the block. Now, the problem in New Zealand is that all the prices quoted to you in business are GST exclusive, but when you sell something, it has to be GST inclusive.
Yes.
So every computer costed Nigel 2.5%, which his accountant never told him about. So he's got an accountant that was not really playing. Incompetent accountant.
Wow.
And Nigel just made a simple mistake. He was from UK. He didn't really fully understand the taxation implications and was not advised well in terms of his pricing policy.
I had C.B. Woodhouse on the show a couple of months ago, and he was nearly put out of business by his accountant in his company, Orcon, not through incompetence, but rather fraud. And so the GST and I believe the PAYE was not being paid, even though it was being put aside into a retention account, and the accountant was keeping it for himself. And
wow.
So it's a pause on a reflection. I was in a conversation about board governance yesterday with some angels down in Wellington, and the rhetoric that came from Ben Keeps is trust and check.
Yep.
Trust and check. Because we need to get into business with people.
In Russian, we have a saying, trust by verify.
Trust by verify.
Trust but verify.
But verify. Okay, yeah, I like that.
Yeah. It translates.
Yes.
Доверяй, но проверяй.
Okay.
Translates directly as trust, but verify.
It's almost sounds musical in that sense as well. So I love that. So the business wasn't paying GST enough. It was selling product for less than it was buying it. So of course it was going to collapse. And you extracted yourself with a small loss. And so then when did you come across Linux?
So at that same time, I was a software developer contracting to New Zealand Steel. So I was helping build the finishing plants business system that there. And one of the colleagues brought the paper called The Cathedral in the Bazaar, written by Eric Raymond.
Mm-hmm. Great book.
And I read that book and I was an instant convert. I thought this open source thing is the future. And I don't see it as free. I see it as more a better collaboration than the commercial licensed model. And I still see the two coexisting very, very nicely. And I saw it back then. And so to me, this was almost a philosophical as well as a commercial opportunity that I saw. So when we set up this JV with Nigel, was called CompuCorp. One of the things that I've done is I've bought online a few box sets of SUSE Linux, and I've put them on the counter. And I was in that business with Nigel while still doing my contracting work at New Zealand Steel. And I remember one day I was at New Zealand Steel doing my programming, and I get a phone call. And I pick up the call, and the fellow on the other side say, I want to speak to Igor Portugal. I said, yeah, that's me. Hi, my name is Chris, and I've just been to your shop and bought a box of Linux, SUSE Linux. I said, yeah, thinking he might need some support. He said, I would like to go into business with you.
It's a weird call, not the thing you'd expect to take when you're sitting away happily programming.
It's like, yeah. He said, look, I've got a project. We're producing the Millennium celebrations at Alcao Bay, which will conclude at year 2000. Once that project is over, I was looking for next thing to do. And building a business selling Linux to businesses is exactly what I could do. Would you like us to go into business together? I said, yeah, let's talk. And so as it happened, when the computer shop collapsed, I basically collected the few customers that I've had, and that's when we set up Asterisk.
Okay, got it. And so you were a pioneer in the space with a technology form which was new to the scene and probably not what people had on their roadmap or their purchase intention. So what were those early conversations with people like about educating and informing them about what it was and convincing them that it was the right technology for them to buy?
Well, the early customers that we had were trying to escape some of the issues that they had with the commercial software, especially some of the issues around the Microsoft licensing at the time. Nobody was looking at the big Unix systems either, but the reliability of Unix, people knew about that, and so selling Linux wasn't easy. But there was a group of technologists that were very, very open to it fairly early on, and all I needed to do is convince them that we have a business around it that will support them for the longer term. But what we very quickly fell into as well is it's more than less delivering technology and more delivering outcomes. So one day a fellow walked into to our office with a gutted computer in one hand and a PCI card in another hand, and he said, I work with Walker Wireless, and they sell these wireless PCI cards as a way to access their internet. Can you put this PCI card into this box so it becomes a firewall? And that was the birth of the first what now call MSSPs, Managed Security Service Providers, because what we've done is we've engineered a Linux-based firewall that would contain the Walker wireless cards, and we've established a partnership with the company, and they used to sell a lot of these firewalls, and we were providing them as a fully managed service, so people didn't have to go under the hood and learn the commands, and we would manage the cybersecurity for them. And my head of engineering was a guy by the name of Adam Boileau, who since went on and built Insomnia Security, so one of the largest pen testing companies in New Zealand. Very talented guy, but at the time he was a young 20-something with a hair down to the waistline and an Iron Maiden T-shirt,
like most Linux guys.
So, and I had the pleasure of you walk into a boardroom full of suits, and we start talking about cybersecurity. I said, I'll bring Adam in, and that's a shock value. It's like, what's that?
Yeah, what is that? Yeah, not who.
And then after 5 minutes of him talking, the whole room would be convinced that they'd rather us look after their cybersecurity and not the other way around.
Can understand why, and that's the early days of cybersecurity as well.
That was the early days of cybersecurity. So we found our niche in cybersecurity. We also found our niche in building websites for people. We've built a large online shopping website for one of my friends, whose biggest regret at the time, he built a very successful online e-commerce store in 2001, and it unfortunately tanked when the 9/11 happened, because most of his customers were in the US. But about 6 months before that, a fairly unknown e-commerce site sent him a suggestion that they should merge, and that was biggest regret in his life, because that unknown guy was Sam Morgan, and the company was Trade Me.
So he turned down a merge opportunity with the later $750 million exit. Wow, that would have been a difficult moment to stomach later on. There was a lot of turmoil in the tech industry in New Zealand at that stage, because I recall it well. I was working in tech in Auckland, having returned from the UK in 1998. And so we were going through the tech boom, which was predicated upon the potential of a tech wreck, Y2K. Yeah. And so spend on technology went from around about 1% of companies' revenue to 11% over the late 90s. And so tech went from being, and people that aren't in tech don't know this, it was a minnow of an industry. It wasn't important. It wasn't a powerhouse. It wasn't the top 7 listed companies in the world in those days. And then it just exploded over the course of 2 or 3 years. And there is a long-held debate in technology as to whether it was the most successfully averted man-made disaster or the most successful commercial hoax that was ever pulled of all time. Because as we now know, nothing happened.
Yeah.
And so let's not delve into that, but rather just leave that out there in the ether for people to ponder as an idea. But you started this company, Asterix, in the late 90s, and then you sold in 2001.
2003.
2003.
So we started in 1999. Yeah. And at that time, Chris, my business partner, was still busy producing the Millennium Celebration event, but we already had some customers that we started talking to. So I was slowly merging my customers from CompuCorp to Asterisk. And we sold to GNI in 2003.
It was very quick.
There was a very rather quick exit. Now looking back, we both read The E-Myth, Chris and I, in the early days. It was a great book, and it's the book that taught me that if you're building a business, you need to build an asset. Otherwise, it's just another job. And if you are building an asset, the asset is there to be sold. For the right price to the right buyer. There was another reason why we sold, and that was Chris and I had our disagreements, and we had very, very different visions about where the company should go. And that put a lot of strain on our relationship. In fact, to the point that at one point we were even potentially discussing shutting the business down because we couldn't go ahead. So in a way, the opportunity to sell was a bit of a savior for us and a saving grace, even though we've done a lot of very, very interesting projects and built some really, really cool tech. But I don't think as business partners we were very compatible to run a business such as Asterisk.
Yeah.
And we had to find a way to part company without losing all the money.
Yeah.
So one of the things I now tell people, which is very important, is when you go into business with someone, when you marry someone, you date and you figure out whether it's going to work. When you go into business with someone, it's very similar to marriage, because you end up with them for for a lot of time. You spend more time at work than you do at home, and if you break up, you may lose everything, not just half. So that's.
I totally agree with the analogy. It's bound by a contract that sits in behind the scenes. Yep. One's a marriage contract, the other one is a shareholders agreement.
Yeah.
I say to founders, I often work with a founding team of 2, typically, in the work that I do. And I say to them, I always ask them, how is your relationship? And they look at me kind of oddly. Well, we were in business together. I said, no, but how are you guys getting on? What are you doing to tend the relationship? And I lead on to say that you've got the 2 most important relationships that you have in your life. I'm assuming that you get on well with your kids, and that's not my domain anyway. But it's your spouse, the person that you live with at home, and it's the person that you're sitting in this room with today. And if either of those starts to go wrong, life can be a bit difficult. But I've seen people that their marriage is in a difficult situation, their business partnership is in a difficult situation, and their life is hell. It is a really, really nasty place to be.
It's a very nasty place to be, I agree.
You talked about compatibility. So you've had business partners in a multitude of different ventures. So how do you now, and this is a learning opportunity for people, how do you now assess compatibility of business partners?
Well, I don't have a very scientific way of doing that, unfortunately. But to me, it is a little bit like dating. You try and figure out, you do some projects together. One of the important things that I put in place is always have written agreements. Yeah. Do not do anything on handshake, because handshake can mean different things to different people, and always think about divorce strategy if it comes to that. So don't assume that you're going to be in business forever. So if something doesn't stack up, have an exit strategy for both business partners that is amicable, because at the end of the day, we're all people. We all have our own human quirks, and you don't fully know anyone until you worked with them for, maybe six or 12 months.
I totally agree.
After my marriage fell apart, I went on to hit the dating scene, and a lady once told me, which was interesting, is like when you meet someone, they're not actually going to reveal their true intention until you dated for about 6 months.
Yeah. And duress is that thing that brings out the worst in people. And under ideal circumstances, it's easy to behave well or leave the mask on, is one of the things they talk about. And so what I say I was recently dealing with a situation with 2 business partners. There was no shareholders agreement. And so it meant that they hadn't sat down and had the conversations around either what is our intent with this company? So where are we going with the business? Do we intend to scale this thing forever, build it to making a great profit machine, or maybe not making a profit because we're investing for growth, or do we want to take it to point of sale? And then they had a fundamental falling out, and they didn't have the document to be able to pull out of the drawer. No valuation mechanism, no buyout, conversation that went on. And so it was a difficult conversation for us all to navigate. We ultimately got there successfully, but it was a very fraught period of time whilst they were going through it. And so the shareholders agreement is an opportunity to sit down and get alignment on the key things, which is what do we want, and if it goes wrong, what are we going to do about it?
Those are so important, those agreements and conversations. And in fact, I've started 2 businesses last year, and one of them, my business partner, actually both of them, the business partners that I've started with, I'm no longer with. They both left the business, and it was amicable, and it was basically through realizing that we're not compatible as aligned as business partners. Yeah. And on one hand, you could go to a space where you're going, well, I've had 2 business partners and both didn't work out. Who's the common denominator here? So you kind of can go into that place.
What was the answer when you went there?
Well, I was in there. I just can't hide it. But the other thing is, well, actually, I have this experience. I know what it's like to be in business with someone you're not compatible with. So when I saw in both cases that this is not going to work for both of us, we've cut it down early. So the investment of time was minimal, the investment of money was minimal, the losses were minimal on both sides. And in one of the cases, I had to make a very difficult decision because we've had a customer and a deadline, and losing a CTO was meant that we weren't going to deliver. And so but at the same time, delivering means a longer term engagement together. Yeah. So we sat down and had a very mature conversation about the fact that we're just not compatible going forward, and we don't wish upon each other the hell of going through this. Yeah. We've split from each other amicably, and then I had a difficult conversation to go to sit down with the customer and say, look, I've just lost the CTO, and these are the reasons. And I was expecting to have a very grueling conversation with him, but the customer turned around and said, you've done the right thing. We'll wait. Find another CTO.
It's amazing. Yeah.
And it was like...
It's a lesson in transparency, really? Isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. I just came, I said, I was ready to cancel the contract, do whatever they believe is the right thing. But they said, no, you've done the right thing. It's better to do it now than to struggle through it and
not deliver.
And not deliver.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People really appreciate a explanation and a mea culpa, in my experience, an apology.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'll just wrap back around to that business partnership selection for anyone that's watching that's considering getting into business with someone. Yep. Tools that I've suggested to people are Strengths Finder. The Clifton Strengths Finder is a really helpful thing for people to undertake. Okay. It's about $100 to do a test, and what it does is it lays out for you quite clearly the things that you excel in and the things that you may not be as strong in. I'm assuming the person's going to be intelligent, so there's probably not really a need to do any form of a intelligence, kind of IQ test. The other thing which is quite helpful is a DISC profile. So those two things are cheap and relatively accessible documents that are...
That sounds really interesting.
Yeah,
I should probably take note for some of the things that I'm doing right now. So,
and again, it forces a conversation because you turn up to the table and you say, this is my profile and I'm a high D with a low I, for example. Yeah. How does that manifest in your behaviour, and how do you show up when there's difficult conversations to be had, or do you hide away? So it just really forces the conversation in a mature and a sensible way. Going back to the point that it's paramount to have a really positive business partnership, because otherwise life is just not that much fun to be in. You end up in a place of conflict or turmoil. Yeah. There's 2 character types that I would really strongly recommend trying to identify and avoiding those people. A cynic. A cynic is a very, very hard person to be in business with because they're constantly questioning everything and being cynical about things, and that's energy draining. It sucks the energy out of the room. That's the first one. And the second is a narcissist. Now, I think that we can spot narcissists because there's one that's in very public profile at the moment in the United States. But we've had Trump around for 25 years, 30 years, and so we've kind of, understood some of those traits and characteristics. But narcissists can be quite good at hiding it. And so the world is all about a narcissist. And if you identify those traits, I would really advocate running away or getting out of business with someone in that sort of context.
I wouldn't be quite as dramatic. I think that for every type of person. There is a type of person that can live with us and work with us. It's like, again, just drawing analogy of a marriage back. There is a man for every woman, and there is a woman for every man, where they would be happy with each other, and something that somebody else wouldn't be able to stand. I think it's important to understand earlier on whether or not you are compatible, and that you can work and that you complement each other. And the truth is, and I've seen it time and time again, is when you are compatible, when you can work together, you can shift mountains, and you really can. And
it's a good reframing, actually. Igor. I appreciate that. And I'll probably add to that from a marriage perspective. You really want someone that can bring out the best in you, not the worst. And occasionally we all have our foibles, and we have moments when we don't behave our best. To err is human. And so in those moments, is that version of crazy a version that you can deal with, is another way that I like to think about it. And so there's the, do we are we compatible together? Do we bring out the best? But then if things aren't going that well, can I deal with the way that they handle the things not going that well?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
As I've seen somewhere, again, in the dating scene, someone says, if you cannot handle me at my worst, you don't deserve to have me at my best.
I really like that statement. I haven't heard that before.
Yeah.
Let's go back to Asterisk. So things are going well in the business, and you're having some difficulties in your business partnership with Chris.
Things weren't going well.
Things weren't going well. Okay, cool.
Fairly early on.
Okay.
And we had some difficult conversations, but at the same time, we soldiered on, both of us, and tried to keep the thing going and growing. We were reasonably successful due to we did manage to bring an A game somehow for each of us, and so we were reasonably successful at getting the profile, and we were getting some really good customers. But some of the building blocks of the company were earlier on. I've identified that if we are to be in the product game, we need a channel partnership. So I've realized that going and selling direct and building product at the same time is not going to work very well. So I've been chasing channel partners earlier on, and there were some large companies at the time, Computerland, GNI. So I got Computerland on board, and that was great. But I also wanted to chase GNI because you sort of hedge your bets. And everybody told me that the gentleman I need to talk to is a guy by the name of David Spratt. So it took me 6 months to get to talk to David. He wouldn't return my calls. He wouldn't take calls. He wouldn't return my emails. But then we've ended up having a few customers shared with GNI. And in one day, I've managed to talk to 3 people, and they all from GNI, and they all said, "Oh, you guys have a great product and a great service. We love what we're seeing here." And I said, "Well, please go knock on the door of David Spratt and ask him to return my call." Next day, I get a call from David. "Can I come and see you?" So getting 3 people to come and knock on the door of someone who is influential works. And we're now good friends, and David and I have been in contact and communication all the way through. He's a great business person, and I've got a lot of admiration for him. But that was one of those moments when he walked in. He sat down with Chris and I, looked at everything we do, and scratched his head and said, "We're not going to sell any of your stuff."
Why not?
"We just won't, because we're GNI. But what would you say to us buying your company?"
Wow, that was a quick transition.
That was.
Okay.
And Chris and I were sitting there stunned and said, yeah, let's talk.
Okay.
And that's when it started, the whole acquisition conversation. It took us 12 months to get from that conversation to actually selling the company. But that was a pivotal moment where both of us just put all our differences aside and we said, okay, let's just band together.
Yeah.
That this is our best hope.
12 months, was that 12 months of conversation about what the deal could look like, or was that a period of time to get to the non-binding offer letter and then due diligence? Talk us through that piece.
So it was 12 months of grueling going through spreadsheets and figuring out valuation.
Yeah.
It was very, very, very taxing on the business. It took Chris completely out of the business. He was, bless him, focusing on that and let me get on with sales and getting customers involved. I'd still have to get involved every now and again, but I've let him run the numbers. And 10 months later, Chris came to me and he said, look, this is just impossible. We're never going to arrive at anything that we want. In the meantime, my eyes are off the ball. Yeah. We don't know what we're doing. We should just cut our losses and just keep going, just to make this business work. So we rang up GNI folk and said, sorry guys, we're out. And that was it. I was very big on networking. I still am. And I used to hang out with the New Zealand Software Association. And one of the people on the New Zealand Software Association board at the time was a gentleman by the name of John O'Hara. And a few days later, I get a call. Hi, it's John. Yeah, great. What do you should we catch up? Whatever. I said, actually, there's a reason I'm calling. I said, yeah. One of the things you probably don't know is I'm a director on the board of GNI.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
So, we just told you guys to F off. And he said, yeah, I know. We've talked about it at the board. Can I come and have a coffee with you and Chris? Mm-hmm. I said, yeah, sure. So John shows up to have a coffee and he said, look, so here's the situation. When this thing came on the board agenda, we have so many directors on the board, and I went around the board and asked each of the directors, have you ever bought or sold a startup? And the answer was no. And he said, look, I have. And they said, okay, well, you have a kind of last shot at it. I said, okay, so what's the game plan? And then John, over a coffee said, so how much would you guys want? Right on the, and we came up with the numbers, right on the board. Okay. He walked up to the board, crossed the number, put his number down. Said, would you take this? I said, yeah. Deal. Done.
So in a matter of days, he was able to take something which the corporate folk had nearly destroyed because they were assessing a startup as if it was a long-term business asset.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thinking that we have all the numbers and all the answers and all these graphs.
He wouldn't.
He did not.
Yeah, it's really interesting and something worth pausing on for a second. Apologies for the interruption and thanks for listening to the show. These shows take resources to build and put together. We have a team of producers, we have some promoters behind the scenes, and of course we have the guests that generously give their time to come on the show. My only ask of you is that you go and check out my website. I advise founders on how to build value and how to navigate the exit process successfully. We have a diagnostic on the website. There's an ebook that I've written. There's a free chapter of my upcoming book, Wantrepreneur, on there. So I'd just urge you to take a couple of minutes and go and check out joshcomrie.com. M&A teams, if they have experience, then they can be overzealous with how they go about assessing things. Sometimes it's an intentional tactic. Other times it's to cover their own asses in case something goes wrong post the deal. And by intentional tactic, I mean delay time so that they can impact the price that's going to be paid for the asset. Which is a bit of a crazy notion because they're hurting the asset in the meantime if they're distracting the founders because they'll take their eye off growth. And it takes probably 3 months for someone to jump into your seat and take over a customer relationship. And so you're really damaging the business along the way as well. So it's a crazy notion. And so John, I know John, good guy.
John's a great guy.
Direct, pragmatic, just gets on with things. And so, was able to rescue the deal based upon just having a proper, human-to-human, leader-to-leader conversation and doing a deal quickly.
Yeah.
And so 10 months of pain, a few days of conversation, and then a deal was done. How long after that were you able to then exit the business?
Yeah, well, then they went into due diligence. That took another couple of months. And then we had a 2-year earn-out period.
Oh, long time.
I've spent in the business until 2005.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you and Chris had your moments up until that point in time, and then you had to do another 2 years working together. How was that? Was it okay because you had an end in sight?
It was not. It was not. So we went right back into our moments, but a little bit more constructively because we did have, as I mentioned before, that board of directors around us who were able to arbitrate. But one of the things that happened is Jedi bought us for our service capability, but we were building products
as well, right?
As well. And what I was seeing straight away is that the product line is going to get destroyed because Jedi was not a product company. And so what I decided is when we started to sort of again have our disagreements about strategy, and to be fair, the disagreement was at that point more about do we focus on products or do we just forget the products and focus on services? I wanted to grow the product line and Chris wanted to grow the services. And at some point I suggested, well, why don't we split the company into two? You run the service division, I run the product division. The board didn't like that idea. And then I said to Chris, okay, well, here's another option. Jedi clearly is not going to get any value out of the product line. Why don't I buy the product line back and leave you doing the earn-out on the services? So I took it to the board, and the initial reaction was we'd want a substantial purchase price, and they gave me a target. And I thought, okay, well, I'll try. So I went to the market and looked for some investors, and I pretty much got enough commitment to buy it. And I was going to go and make a pitch to the CFO to buy the product line, and I've asked Chris to back me up on that. And basically the deal that I gave Chris is that you fully back me up on that deal. If I'm successful, I'm out of your hair and you've got the rest of the earn-out to complete. If I fail, I will fall in line. You're going to be the boss and drive the company for another year. So that's the deal that I've made. He agreed. He backed me up. He followed through. I went in all guns blazing, and I got shut down. Later, I've learned why. Because by that time, G&I was already in talks with Telecom about the acquisition of their own. And my little piddly acquisition of small technology part in a big enterprise didn't make sense to anybody, and they just didn't want to deal with it. But they wouldn't tell me because that was all hush. All these telecom sale talks were
New Zealand's a small place, but
fairly confidential. And so I didn't know that, but I followed through with my promise, and I fell in line. And because there wasn't much to do on the product side, and on the services side, we were reasonably successful with capacity. So there wasn't much to sell. So I just went on a 1-year gardening leave. I've learned how to golf. I've learned how to paint. I've learned a lot of interesting things. And I was there when I needed to. I was still outsold pretty much everyone else who was in the company trying to sell things. I've just enjoyed the time where I didn't have a stress.
There's something about scale which I don't think enough founders appreciate the level of involvement that's required for what could ostensibly be quite a small asset that the company is looking to buy. I'll contextualize that because that statement sounds a bit vague. I was in a conversation with a group of founders, investors yesterday, and one of them had represented the M&A head of one of the New Zealand's largest software companies. And the conversation they would have about this asset they were looking to buy would always be, can we imagine that this asset could be 10% of our revenue within 5 years? Can we imagine this asset would be 10% of our revenue in 5 years? And this is a company that's turning over well over 9 figures, so into the hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue. I'm probably giving away who it is there, but that'll do. And so the reason behind it, the rationale behind it, is that if you're buying an asset, there's so much work that goes into evaluating that asset. The DD, the team that's involved, the finance, the integration work, the systems that need to be merged, the compliance, all of these sorts of things. And if you're buying, let's just make a number up here, a $10 million business, it's as much work to do that as it is to buy a $50 million business quite often, because people and resources have to get involved in that.
Yeah.
And so I think that forgetting the buyer's perspective is really detrimental to a vendor, like an owner of a company.
Well, we didn't know the reason why GNI bought Asterisk, but I've learned that later. So,
what was it?
So Asterisk was $1 million business at the time.
Yeah.
And I haven't learned the true reason until well after the deal was done. But the true reason was in New Zealand. So GNI was in the middle of renegotiating a $10 million deal with Air New Zealand, and the CIO at the time got the Linux bug from the IBM fork and basically turned around to GNI, who were Microsoft Gold partner at the time, and said, you either show me your Linux capability or you are out of here.
Got it.
We didn't know that.
Yeah.
We only learned about it later, that there was a GNI deal to be rescued. As it happened, GNI kept the customer, and
yes.
I think the CIO lost his job even before all of the dust settled in that whole scenario. But GNI was able to walk into the room and say, look, we've just acquired the most high-profile Linux company in New Zealand. So we're committed.
Yes.
And that conversation was worth at least $1 million to GNI.
Yeah, got it. Okay. So if you'd asked the question directly of GNI, and you probably did, why is it that you're interested in buying this asset? They probably would have obfuscated and given you a reason that wasn't the real reason.
Absolutely.
Knowing what you know now, and we'll come on to Vodacom in a second, but knowing what you know now about building and selling a business, how would you have circled that problem with today's skill set to understand the true reason for the acquisition and then consequently handle the negotiation conversation in a different way?
Asking questions.
Yeah,
I don't think I've asked enough questions in that, or we've asked enough questions in that process. Yeah. Asking questions and building broader relationships inside the organization that's acquiring you, because at the time GNI was a fairly substantial organization. It was nearly 800 people. So I could have done more to build broader relationships inside the organization and ask more questions.
Yeah,
and consequently, that's I'll circle around to my book called Unasked Question.
Yep.
It's
we have a copy of it here, by the way. Unasked Questions.
Unasked
We'll give you that.
Yeah. So the whole premise of Unasked Question, it's a sales workshop in a story, like one of my beta readers called it. It wasn't my words.
It's a parable. It's a fictional tale.
It's a fictional tale, but it talks about a sales strategy where asking questions is a central to any business-to-business sales strategy.
Yeah.
And it sort of teaches you how to construct those questions and how to build the right angles.
Could you give the high notes from the book for us, Igor? So for those watching, it'd be good for them to get a sense as to when they buy a copy, what they could experience.
Well, it's a tale. It's written in a similar style as The Goal or The Phoenix Project, which is a business fiction. I call it the genre business fiction. It's a story of a chief technology officer that becomes an accidental CEO, and he focuses on fixing the technology first, and stuffs up the whole sales strategy for the company, and ends up losing his marriage, ends up losing his house, and about to lose his company. And the only thing that he can save him is turn around the sales for the company in order to pretty much salvage everything he's got left in his life.
Yeah. So that's the context. What is it that readers could expect to encounter from like a method or an approach perspective?
So I've read a whole raft of sales books in the last few years that helped me formulate a fairly successful sales strategy, and I do reference a lot of those sales books. Everything in this book is fiction except for the sales strategy in those sales books that I reference. They are real sales books. So there is a strategy around understanding the customer's pain points and building a map of those pain points as you engage with the customer. I give it a term. I call it Papodema, or pain point identification map. And I also introduced some new and interesting terms into the book. So one of them is called the fiscal distance, and that is the distance between where the customer think they are and where they want to be. And to me, every problem, every pain can be expressed in the dollar terms when you're talking to a business, and that is what I call fiscal distance. And then when you create a solution, one of the things that people forget a lot of the time is when they solve a problem for a customer, is they always roll out the price that they're going to charge the customer. But that's not the entire cost for the customer. There is a cost of change that a lot of people forget about. There is a cost of implementation and adoption on the customer's behalf. There's also often a business as usual disruption when that change happens. And to me, all those costs need to be accounted in any solution for the customer, either by the customer or yourself, but you need to be acutely aware of it. And I call the combination of all these costs, I call it the cost of travel. So you've got the fiscal distance, and then you've got a cost of travel. And as long as your cost of travel is less than the fiscal distance, you got yourself a sale. If it's not, you're pretty much not going to sell anything.
Yes.
To these people.
I really like the approach that you've taken there. I'm a big fan of Patrick Lencioni's work. Five Dysfunctions of Team is the one that springs to mind. There's many others.
That's another business fiction genre. That is a very similar style.
And it's a beautiful way to craft a message that's enjoyable to read, but there's some deep learning that comes off the back end of it.
So you'll find a lot of the same tropes as Patrick Lencioni has. There is a consultant, there is a workshop, there is a team, there is a skepticism. All of that is in the book. There's and there is a personal drama, of course, as well.
Has to be
with the main protagonist losing his family and his wife, and enduring the pain of trying to regain it all back.
Yeah, amazing. And it's a bestseller, I believe.
It was on launch. So when I launched it in early March for the first week, it was number one bestseller on Amazon AU.
Yes.
In two categories that it was listed in. So I was pretty pleased with its trajectory.
Yeah, well done. Congratulations. our researchers dug up some things that I'm going to call Igorisms, and I'd like to talk to some
Sure.
of these, if I may.
Sure.
Being a founder means doing everything nobody else wants to do.
Absolutely.
Tell us more about that.
That's what I call the CEO, is Chief Everything Officer. Basically you've got a business and things need to be done, and you have a certain amount of revenue and a certain amount of investment where you can pay people to do things, and then everything you can't afford to pay for you end up doing yourself, because basically that's the point where I don't have the money, I can't afford it, nobody else knows how to do it or wants to do it, but it still has to be done, and the buck stops.
Yes. Yeah, I love that. Bob Drummond, one of the founders of Comrie, which we had a $300 million exit out of last year. I was a many times investor in that. Wonderful, wonderful journey for everybody.
Yeah.
He had a wonderful expression that when they went through their rapid growth over the COVID period, that they would dump more and more tasks onto the founders. There was 4 on that founding team, which is a big founding team.
Yeah.
And the most capable senior people they had, and they did, stress and work people pretty hard over a period of growth. When you're growing and there's a lot of work to be done, it's an exciting time to be able to do that. But it does talk to the underpinning thing, which is that founders have to take on a big load. And they're also very capable people typically. So load those people up and they'll work out the best way to do it. Then the first thing that you do is try and automate as much of that as you possibly can. And the things that are left over, you hire for that.
Yeah.
The mistake that I've seen many, many times before, and you've probably seen this as well, is that people go, we'll do the job, someone, and then when we've got too much job to be done, then we just hire another person. Whereas the automation thing is that's a rich opportunity now. And
Absolutely.
so this is a nice blend of a conversation actually into what you're up to these days. And I'll come back and pick up Vitacorp along the way, Vitacom I should say. So you now are in behind a few early stage AI ventures. So what are you focused on there, Igor?
Absolutely. So the one that I probably focus on is Octavox. Octavox is sort of just going back to Vodacom. Vodacom was or still is a IP telephony startup, and I couldn't keep away from telephony for long enough. So when I saw the conversational AI, I straight away saw this opportunity to bring conversational AI into telephony, contact centers, and help desks, and we are taking an angle which to me is natural, but I don't see a lot of the large players in AI doing it. And it is, rather than try and replace the human out of the call center or help desk, we are giving the human the power to do more, to hold more conversations at the same time. So we've taken an approach where the conversational AI is the tool for the call center agent, not to replace the call center agent or help desk person. And they use that tool to have more conversations simultaneously.
So in practical terms, does that mean they're on whatever agent they've got on the background whilst having a call, or is it more that there's multiple?
No, the AI is having a call, and
Yes.
they monitor live what's happening with that call. And we've built a piece of technology which we call Octavox Switchboard, and that switchboard enables them to direct AI when AI goes off script, and take over the call if need be, but also provide direction to the conversation.
Yeah, great. So Asterix sold a couple of year in out. Vodacom built that, sold it, then took the job.
Took the job.
Yeah.
And it was very, very interesting. There's a lot of conversations with people going, well, you've run your own business. Why would you work? Would you be able to take direction? Would you be able to follow instructions and do something that somebody else wants to tell you? It was quite difficult, actually. And I know that I wasn't alone in this situation. I've spoken to a lot of founders who did an exit and not necessarily earned enough to retire, because you don't always earn enough to retire. Yeah. And they had found a similar sort of conversations. So my answer was with Vodacom, having experienced the governance, the board governance with Asterisk, when I founded Vodacom, I was very set on the governance to be there from day one. And so I have always in Vodacom reported to a board of directors, and they held me accountable all the way through. And so my response was, look, haven't for the last 12 years, even though I ran a company, haven't really worked for myself. And in fact, the last couple of years of Vodacom, I've brought an external CEO. And he came in and bought in the company. Ultimately, he was the person I've exited to. He bought some of my shares along with some investors in Enterprise, which is a publicly listed company. So we did a share swap there as well. Ultimately, he was instrumental in helping me exit the business, and that was a much more lucrative exit for me than the first one. Yeah. But I have worked for someone, and I don't have any problems working for people as well as leading people. I perform quite well in both scenarios. It just took a little bit to convince people.
Yeah, but it was going to be okay. I just want to pause on that for a second, as it's a relevant point to share.
Yeah,
I've had a number of guests on the show that have had huge exits, in the 9 figures plus kind of exits.
Yeah.
And those are the ones that get into the press and the ones that we celebrate, and Absolutely. The ones that has some consequences for people as well, because unexperienced wealth can create some issues for people, which is, boo-hoo, poor you, you've got $100 million. But, you probably had a profitable business up until that time, but it does create some issues for folk. And so the reality is with most business exits, though, is that they will sit, if a good exit would be one that would be in the low millions of dollars, like $3, $4, $5 million. And as you've said, that's not enough to retire. I don't think that you'd retire anyway. Am I correct on that?
No, I wouldn't.
Retirement's not what it's cracked up to be.
Retirement, not an option. So Vodacom, I've exited Vodacom at a $3 million valuation. I was not 100% shareholder, obviously, so I had a portion of that, a good portion of that. Look, the way I describe my journey as an entrepreneur to everyone is my first exit gave me a deposit for a house, to buy a house in Auckland, and that was good. My second exit paid off the mortgage, and since then I've divorced. And I now have a new mortgage, so that's why I'm back on the market, building new businesses
and writing books.
I don't think this will pay off the mortgage.
Not much of the mortgage.
Not likely.
Why did you write the book?
That's an excellent question. I had a bucket list project to write a novel, not this one. It was a different novel. It was a science fiction novel.
Right.
Back in early 2020, I think 2010 or 2011, before that I had a lot of philosophical and political debates, including debates around open source technology, but also debates about the role of technology in our lives and how we should govern ourselves. I'm a libertarian by my beliefs. I believe that we should be given the benefit of the doubt and be able to be people of our own destiny. And so I had a lot of these debates, and then suddenly they turned toxic. Debating, especially on social media, became difficult. But what I've done is I've preserved a lot of the online debates that I've had, and I thought I wanted to turn this into a novel. I was a big fan of Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged and a way to deliver libertarian ideas in a novel. So I wanted to do something like that. And I started this novel in 2010, 2011, and I wrote a few chapters and then I ran out of steam. Business, life everything else. And I had it for about 10 years. It was sitting there as something I'd get back to and sort of tidy up a few words here and there as you do, but never really get any further. And when ChatGPT came out, I looked at it and I thought about all of the ideas I'm talking about, the AI and the society. It's happening now. I have to finish this. So that was Christmas 2022. And I sat down and I wrote the first draft of that novel. And I've asked a few people to read it and give me feedback. That was a very interesting exercise. One of them is my sister. She's a very avid reader, and a few other friends. And everyone who read it said, good idea. But, mate, you have to go back to school. You don't know how to write. You don't want to subject anybody to this torture. It was brutal.
You were trained as a software engineer, right?
It was brutal. In fact, at one point, my sister came to visit and she said, I got a flight back to Sydney for 3 hours. Can you print out a copy of your book so I can read? I need something to put me to sleep on the airplane.
I love how brutally honest our families can be with us, but also very helpfully, right?
It was. So that didn't deter me. So I went into learning. So I've picked up. There's a lot of podcasts. There's a lot of lectures online that you can take in writing.
Yes.
And so the entire 2023, I've spent learning how to write.
Yes.
I've rewritten that novel 5 times. 3 times completely from the scratch, start to finish. And I kept getting feedback from people until people started telling me that it's actually now an interesting read. I've learned how to publish. I've learned how the whole publishing industry works. And I had the whole plan to self-publish that novel, but I was still submitting to traditional publishers. And one of the things I kept on coming across is people talking about writing a book to support their business aspirations. So Christmas 2023, I was ready to self-publish the book, and I had a 3-month self-publishing plan. And suddenly I get a response from one of the traditional publishers, a boutique publisher in the US, saying, "Yeah, this looks interesting. We might take it on." So, cool. I put that on hold and went into building my businesses. One of the things I went into is being a fractional chief of growth. So I work with a number of brands, helping them with sales strategy and execution, basically helping with sales. And then I thought, I want to write a book to outline the sales strategy. Ideally, initially, so I can give it to my customers to read as the strategy that I'm going to employ.
Train them on how you're going to sell to them.
Exactly. Train them on how. So that was the idea of an unasked question. And of course, the first thing that your brain kicks into overdrive is the imposter syndrome.
Of course.
Igor, who are you to tell people how to sell? You never done this, $9 million exits or $100 million exits. You never did deals, beyond sort of a few $1 million. You talk about some of these American sales books that, we sell the $1 billion of that.
Mike Roberge, that's my favorite one, the sales acceleration formula.
Yeah.
Number 3 at HubSpot, took it to a multi-billion-dollar enterprise, massive kind of sales chops about him. So how did you quiet the imposter syndrome?
Well, that's exactly what happened, is that I thought, well, I've just spent the whole year learning how to write fiction. And I really like the goal. I really like the work of Patrick Lencioni and these books. I can just write a novel. Yeah. And then it's not about me or my skills. It's about, and it's how engaging and entertaining a story that I can build that will let people to easily read that. And that's what I set out to do. I've started last March and spent 3 months writing the first draft. And then I already knew the formula. I got some people to read it and give me feedback and incorporate that feedback. I got my editor to read it, one of the early versions, and he came back to me and said, "This is like miles better than the first draft of the first novel that you've done." That's how it came about.
So a lot of people, I suspect, me included, I've spent 9 months writing Wadtrepreneur. I've temporarily shelved it. I'm going to revisit it. But the book that was actually the right one for me to write is Two Commas, the name of the podcast, which is on multi-million-dollar exits. I'm still working on the byline.
It reminds me, I don't know if you watched this series Silicon Valley.
That's where I had the inspiration from.
The Tres Commas guy.
The billionaire. Yeah. For those that haven't watched Silicon Valley, it's a great show. That's literally where the inspiration for Two Commas came from. Yeah.
Good.
And so, thank you. And so...
Why not Dos Commas?
Yeah, I started with that, but too many people didn't know what it was.
I see.
So when I was talking to one of my mentors, who, by the way, he talks about the process of writing books, Matt Church is his name, and great guy, and the process for writing books of Pulitzer Prize winners is to write 100,000 word manuscript and then throw it away.
I've done that.
And then start again.
I've done that.
Yeah. So I have kept all of my writing. Some of it's embarrassing and some of it I've repurposed, but I'll go back and I'll reuse it. But for those that have writing a book on their bucket list, and I think for a lot of achievement-oriented driving sort of people, it probably does sit somewhere on that list. What would be the couple of 3 things that you would suggest to them if they haven't started or if they're early on in that journey, based upon your experience now with a published book that's in your hand that has hit the bestseller list? What would your suggestion and your experience share be?
So, learn. It's a craft. It's not something we're born with. It's something that can be learned. So one of the first books I would recommend to read is Stephen King's On Writing.
Okay.
It's an amazing book. It gives you a blueprint from one of the best known living writers of our time.
5,000 words a day, I believe, that he writes as well.
Yeah. So On Writing, in addition to that, there are lots of very good podcasts. And also there are online courses that are available. I would focus on learning how to construct a story and how to engage the reader. It's so important, whether you're writing fiction or non-fiction, that reader engagement is important. A lot of people who write don't, especially new writers, they don't pay attention to their readers' emotional journey, and that's a hard craft to grasp. But it's there are a few podcasts that talk about it very well. So
any spring to mind?
Yeah, well, I love one called the Fiction Author Business School by Liesl Hill. She's one of my inspirators. I've binge listened to all her podcasts since. I think she started in 2018 or 2019, and she was doing them once a week, and I was just binge listening to them in 2023. That's one of them. There's a few others. There's a self-publishing school by Chandler Bolt that's got a lot of interesting tidbits on how to self-publish and how to motivate yourself when you write. There's quite a few. There's a lady in UK called Joanna Penn, the Creative Pen podcast, and she also has a lot of good material for learning and inspiration. But I'd say it's a craft.
Yeah.
And if you're serious about it, learn it.
Yeah.
It's important.
Got it. Thank you. I would add a book to that. I'm not sure if you've read it. Economical Writing.
No.
Great book.
You know, I'm consuming anything to do with writing.
Great.
I love it.
I forget the name of the author, but it's on the technical craft of writing, sentence construction, lengths, where you drop words into. Small picture, not big picture. And the work from Matt Church, he's written about writing as well, which is really quite helpful too. You also have a mission that you've been on for the last year, 18 months or so. It started as 99 coffees.
Yes.
I think you've gotten reset it again. And so
I still call it the 99 coffees.
Okay, cool.
But
you're up to number...
I'm up to number... So I've got a couple of strains to it. So there's coffees that I do on my own, and that's under the brand 99 Coffees. But I also do some coffees with the CIO Summit, promoting CIO Summit. They call the CIO Cafe, where I'm interviewing sponsors and speakers and award nominees.
Yes.
For the CIO Summit. So
Yes.
that's called the CIO Cafe. So I've done 16 CIO Cafe coffees last year, and
Yes.
I'm going to do another 20 this year. And I'm up to 110 of my own 99 coffees. So
They're all over LinkedIn, and
all over, yeah.
I've really enjoyed the stories and getting the insight into the individuals, because I know a lot of them. It's Auckland, it's New Zealand,
Yeah.
And you have a great way of bringing their story to light and sharing it. And no doubt, at the same time, in the background, you are practicing the writing craft.
Of course.
So there's another motivation for you. But you're highlighting some people that perhaps wouldn't ordinarily get the opportunity to do that. What's your motivation, Igor?
My motivation is rising tide lifts all boats.
Ah.
And so if I help someone to be more visible, it will lift everyone around them, myself included, and shine the light on our industry.
I love that. Yeah, I think over the last couple of years, post-COVID, and I think it started during COVID, we started New Zealand bashing, and that went from being a general thing to being perhaps a little bit of a direct personal thing. You know, we're a tiny, tiny nation, and we're actually a centrist nation, and the world is trying to make us divisive and move us to one side or the other, political spectrum, belief spectrum. The DEI, LGBTQ thing, it's about divisiveness, and it's just so crazy. And you're an authentic citizen of the world. Originally from the Ukraine, studied in different parts of the world, chosen to make New Zealand your home. And so I love the notion that you've brought there, which is kind of we're in this together. And if we support and encourage and develop each other, then it will just help elevate everyone.
Yeah. Well, I'm a very proud New Zealander now. I've been in New Zealand for over 30 years. And I'm a very proud member of the New Zealand tech industry. I truly believe that our tech industry is punching well above its weight. And every time people try and belittle us as an industry, and try and compare us to US or any other overseas jurisdictions or Australia, I bring it back to, look, we're a country of 5 million people. We're a suburb in a city in most of these other industries, but most of these other countries. But if you look at this industry and some of the companies that we produced, some of them are visible, but some of them are not. And where we're at in a global scale in both the supply chain, but also some of the startups that were produced that ended up being acquired by overseas companies. I believe we've done well more than a 5 million person country can do.
Couldn't agree more.
And I know a lot of these people. I know how hard they work. I know how talented they are, and I'm very proud of our industry, and I love to shine the light on as many corners of this industry as possible.
Thank you for doing so. I think there's no better example of what you just talked about there than Rocket Lab.
Absolutely.
So tech, deep tech, space tech.
Yeah.
Peter Beck and his team, launch the third highest number by country of space-bound vehicles by country. The third highest. Yeah. United States, China, New Zealand. That's the order. We're a country of 5 million people. One thing I love about what happened with Rocket Lab is that when they went out to raise their, I think, Series B, the Australian government committed immediately $150 million because they couldn't bear to not be in space. And they needed to have some claim to being in space, even though Rocket Lab is a very, very staunchly New Zealand company, and Peter Beck is a wonderful human and a very strong, proud Kiwi. For anyone that hasn't watched, and this is a great recommendation for you, Wild, Wild Space. It's a documentary that is on Neon at the moment. Peter's on there, and there's a moment where He's returning to New Zealand, having endeavoured to get a job with the big space companies in the States, Boeing, NASA, Lockheed Martin, etc. And he was unable to do so. And he's talking in the third person about, you wonder what it's all about and where you're going and what it all means. And he clearly went into a state of depression. And then he says, the only reasonable, logical explanation is, fuck it, let's start a company.
Yep.
So he personifies if we can't get it done some other way, then let's just do it ourselves. And I, like you, Igor, am very proud of being a New Zealander. I was lucky enough to be born here, but also the industry that we've created. And Igor, I thank you for the generosity of insight, time, the work that you're doing to elevate other people, and also just for being a good dude in and around New Zealand tech scene. And I really appreciate you coming on the show today.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Igor. If you enjoy these episodes, I hope you do. I love filming them, and the guests always say what a great and often cathartic experience it is for them. Then please do like and share. Hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm open to connect requests, and occasionally I get emails from people as well asking me about my experience around certain subjects. So please do like and share and continue to follow the show. I really appreciate your ears.